right, I'd like to slow this conversation right down and actually talk about it properly because it's something that I keep seeing over and over again, especially in the GLP-1 space. And frankly, it's really starting to worry me. So somebody wants to lose weight and they're automatically told to calculate their TDEE and they're told to eat below this number. And suddenly that number becomes the number with no context, no nuance, no follow-up thinking. So before we go any further, let's just clear up the basics because acronyms can sometimes make people nod along even when they're not quite sure exactly what they mean. So TDEE stands for Total Daily Energy Expenditure. That's really just a fancy way of saying how much energy your body uses in a day, and that's it. And that energy use is made up of a few different things. Firstly, you've got your basal metabolic rate, or BMR, and that's the energy that it takes simply to keep you alive. So it's the energy that we need for our brain, our heart, our kidneys, our digestive system. Then there is exercise, and then there's digestion, and then there's something called NEAT, which is non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And NEAT, well, NEAT is where this whole conversation starts to fall apart because NEAT includes all of the movement that you do, but you don't log as exercise. So this can look like walking around the house, standing instead of sitting, pacing while you're talking on the phone, even down to things like fidgeting or cooking or cleaning, picking up after the kids, living. And here's the thing that people don't realize until it kind of bites them in the butt. NEAT can vary by hundreds of calories a day and between people, and it's extremely sensitive to how much you're eating. So when your calories drop, NEAT often drops right along with it, quietly and subconsciously and without you ever deciding to move less. And this is not laziness and it's not a loss of discipline. It's simply your nervous system conserving energy. And no TDEE online calculator is going to see that happen. But let's go back a step because the reason why people get so attached to TDEE is quite understandable because it's a number, it feels scientific, it feels objective, and it gives a level of certainty. You type in your height, your weight, your age, you select whether you're moderately active, and boom, there's your number. And people start talking about this number like it's a fixed trait. Something similar to eye color, like my TDEE is 1900 calories. Well, no, your TDEE was estimated to be around 1900 calories under certain assumptions. And those assumptions are doing a lot of heavy lifting because two women can both tick moderately active and yet live completely different lives. One will fidget constantly, paces, stands, moves without thinking, and the other becomes very efficient with energy when food drops. Same workouts, same steps on paper, totally different NEAT though. Same calculated category, but very different realities. Now, what usually happens next is this. Someone gets their TDEE, let's say it's 2,000 calories to make it easy, and then they're told to eat 1,500 calories, which is a nice, neat 500 calorie deficit. And on paper, this makes sense. It looks good, right? But bodies don't live on paper. So here's a real-world example that I want people to actually see. Let's say that 2,000 calorie TDEE estimate is roughly correct on day one. You start eating 1,500 calories. What happens next? Well, you don't decide to move less, but you do. Maybe you fidget less, or you sit more, or you have an injury, or you take fewer unconscious steps. maybe your posture changes, your body gets a little bit more economical. That can easily be 150 to 300 calories a day gone from NEAT alone. And then there's adaptive thermogenesis, which is a very fancy way of saying your body slightly turns down the energy output when it senses a prolonged drop in intake. So now the resting energy expenditure drops a little bit. Training output drops a bit because you're underfueled. Your recovery slows. And suddenly that 500 calorie deficit is more like 100 to 150 calories in real life. You're still eating less, but your body is also spending less. And people don't realize that this is happening. They just know the scale has stalled. So what do? Well, more often than not, they're going to cut the calories again and again. And now we're in a spiral. This is where midlife physiology really starts to matter, because fluctuating estrogen changes how your body handles fuel. It affects our insulin sensitivity. It affects our appetite regulation. It affects our stress tolerance. A deficit that felt annoying but doable at 35 can suddenly feel absolutely punishing at age 48 because you've lost any willpower, and not because your metabolism is broken, because the context has changed. TDEE calculators don't know that. They don't understand that. Now, let's layer GLP-1 medications on top of all of this, because this is where the stakes get much higher. GLP-1s reduce appetite, and for many people, this can be dramatically. And that can be incredibly helpful, but appetite suppression is not the same thing as optimal fueling. Now, what I'm seeing over and over again is this. Somebody starts a GLP-1. They're given a TDEE number and they're told to eat below it. But now your appetite is blunted, so your intake drops pretty fast, often far below what you've intended. Your protein drops, and perhaps your strength training performance drops as well, and your recovery drops. Weight comes off rather quickly, and suddenly everyone's celebrating. But when you actually look at body composition, a meaningful chunk of that weight loss is more likely lean muscle mass. And for women in their 40s, 50s, and beyond, this matters enormously. Muscle is not just about aesthetics. It's metabolic health, it's bone health, it's insulin sensitivity, and it's independence later in life. Losing muscle makes future fat loss much harder, not easier. So I'm going to give you a realistic scenario here. There's a woman in her early 50s and she starts a GLP-1. She loses 15 kilos over several months, and this sounds like a win. However, if we look down deep below that surface, 20 to 30% of that weight loss is lean muscle mass. And that's a lot of kilos of muscle gone. Resting energy expenditure drops, strength drops, and now maintaining that loss becomes much harder than expected. And nobody warned her because everyone was focused on that calorie number. This is why I keep saying that TDEE is not the villain, but blind faith in it is. TDEE should be a starting hypothesis, not a rule that you obey harder when things stop working. For women on GLP-1s especially, this conversation needs to be slightly different. Your protein has to be intentional. Your strength training has to be a non-negotiable, and your NEAT has to be protected. And progress also needs to be monitored beyond the bathroom scale, because fat loss that sacrifices muscle is not a win in the long term. I'm going to repeat that because this is so important. Fat loss that sacrifices muscle is not a win in the long term. And here's the part that I really want to land today. If you're on a GLP-1 and your appetite is low, that does not mean that your body needs less nourishment. It means that the signal to eat is slightly quieter, and these are not the same thing. So instead of asking, what's my TDEE and how far can I go below it, the better questions are, how is my energy? How is my strength? And how am I recovering? What's happening to my movement each day? And what's happening to my muscle mass? Now, numbers can help guide those questions, but they cannot replace them. Fat loss works best when the body feels supported and not cornered. And if there's one message I want to get across in all of this, it's this. You are not failing in the maths. The maths was never the whole story, especially not for women, and especially not for women in midlife. And also, especially not in this GLP-1 era.